From the first day of establishing their state in May 1948 on the land of Palestine, the Jews realized that this entity they established was a foreign object amid a siege by Arab countries. The Arab countries that surround the Jews, the first context around Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon means like a cordon around Palestine. After that, in a larger context than other Arab countries. For them, for the Jews, this is a very great danger, a threat in strategic security. You can call it an existential threat because it is suffocated, the state is completely isolated from the world, the frames around it. In order for the Jews to get out of this predicament, they thought about politics. A very dangerous strategic method. The most prominent of this or that method, meaning the most prominent of these methods that they used. A method they call the doctrine of pulling the parties, or it means parties from outside that call them ours. What does alliance of the parties mean? What does alliance of the parties mean? This doctrine, Ben-Gurion, along with one named Eliyahu Sasson, coined Eliyahu Sasson, one of Israel's leading experts on the Middle East and the first Jewish diplomatic representative in Ankara, Turkey. This policy is based on two ideas. The first idea is the enemy of my enemy, my friend. They will form alliances with countries that will be enemies of the Arab countries at that time. At the same time, the second idea on which it is based is that these countries are outside the Arab countries, geographically benefiting from the geopolitical point, as if they were excluding the Arab countries from their parties. Thinking about this plan, it's clear they aim to establish relationships with countries around the Arab world, while maintaining tensions, wars, or hostilities between them and the Arab world. The countries with these qualities at this time were Turkey, Iran, and Ethiopia. Turkey then had tense relations with Syria. Iran has tense relations with Iraq, and Ethiopia has tense relations with Sudan. If it establishes relations with the three states, it would be as if it had struck a cordon around the Arab countries. It is not a tight cordon, but a cordon that is influential in relations and begins to deal on this basis. Very early diplomatic relations after the year 1948 with the three countries. This talk is very important in order to understand the course of events. After that, in order to understand the strength of Israeli-Turkish, Israeli-Iranian, Israeli and Ethiopian relations and their applications until now. I mean, this talk is not the talk of history. But why does this talk have applications and effects in the armies, in ministries, in embassies, in international relations, and in the United Nations? There are very many needs in terms of relations with the states, which are very influential in the movement of the Jews on the land of Palestine, with Turkey. The surprise that many may not know is that Turkey is the first Muslim country to recognize Israel. This was said in March 1949, very early. I mean, the state was created for the Jews. Their state was created on May 48, 48. Or a Muslim state that recognizes the Jews. In March of the year 49 and in January of the year 50, Turkey had a commission in Tel Aviv, a Turkish commission in Tel Aviv, a commission that remained a little less than the embassy and less than the commission to carry out work or charge d'affaires, but it did an intermediate need called a commission. In 1958, Ben-Gurion signed an agreement with Adnan Menderes, the Turkish Prime Minister at the time, to resist extremism and to resist Soviet influence in the Middle East. In 1991, they exchanged ambassadors. Unfortunately, the ambassadors mean there was a Turkish ambassador in Tel Aviv and an Israeli ambassador in Ankara in 1991 and in the year 96 in February. And then in August, they made two agreements, a very large military cooperation agreement, and this agreement is still in force until now in major military cooperation between Israel and Turkey. This is the first part of its second part policy with Iran. Iran is the second Muslim country to recognize Israel in 1953. During the 1967 war, Iran was the one supplying oil to Israel in the 1967 war and beyond. The two countries exchanged ambassadors in the 1970s, and relations were ostensibly severed after the Khomeini Revolution in 1979, but it was proven that Israel was supplying Iran with weapons in the first Gulf War. The first Gulf War, which is between Iran and Iraq, as in Operation Shell of the Sea in 1981, its weapons were Israeli for Iran. From 1983 to 1985, Iran purchased 500,000 worth of weapons from Israel. Studies show that 80% of the Iranian weapons used in the first Gulf Aleppo were made in Israel. This is for Iran. For Ethiopia, consular relations with Ethiopia began in the year 56. Israel participated in thwarting an attempted coup against the Emperor Haile Selassie, the Ethiopian emperor at the time, in the year 60. In the year 61, Ethiopia recognized Israel and exchanged embassies in the year 62. Along in the year 63, Shimon Peres visited Ethiopia. He stood on the Blue Nile and said, "From here, from the Blue Nile, the life of Egypt begins." That's why they see the dam. Renaissance is done on the Blue Nile. His equipment and arrangements from this period, and after that he was in very great support from the Jews to the Ethiopian army, whether by supplying weapons, supplying technology, or training soldiers. During the Eritrean War of Independence, Eritrea stood with Ethiopia. Eritrea was independent from Ethiopia. When many wars took place between them, at that time Israel was standing with Ethiopia. My history that we said explains many things to us. It really explains to us the imaginary war that is taking place between Iran and Israel, which are the missiles that do not have a major impact between the two parties. The roots, the relationship between them is very great, even after the Communist Revolution. As we mentioned in the examples, it explains to us Turkey's contentment with speeches, denunciations, such as, but without breaking relations over the past 2 or 3 decades, and it did not go beyond the last year or the last few months. We are talking about the previous 20, 30 years with all the pressure that the Jews are exerting on Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, and so on. I mean, all the past wars did not have a reaction from Turkey. Oh God, the only denunciatory speeches, but relations KK preferred to continue military cooperation, uncle and joint maneuvers. Jewish support for Turkey in terms of equipment and weapons exported to them. This is all continuous. Relations with Ethiopia are very strong, and I want an episode alone. The relations were strong and are still strong, and its future looks stronger. And not only that, this will explain to us that there is a military base in Eritrea for the Jews. The Jews established a military base in the year 95 on the Dahlak Islands. These islands are located in the Red Sea, and these islands overlook Bab al-Mandab and Ali. Why is the Red Sea so dangerous? The Jews worked in Eritrea because of the theory of tightening the parties or siege of Alta, the alliance of parties that is around the Arab countries, so they landed in Eritrea. Although they were against Eritrea when Eritrea was moving from Ethiopia, after it was liberated from Ethiopia, they worked with it and set up a military base there. He also explains this to us as a resident. Israel has very strong relations with the Republic of South Sudan. The republic that arose in South Sudan in the year 2011 and was independent from Sudan for a long time. Israel has established relations with it because it also has the same theory, which is the siege of the Arab countries from its parties. And it is not just the tightening of the parties or the doctrine of an alliance of the parties that is used by the Jews to weaken the Arab countries. But there are many other ways, including cooperation with the minorities present in Arab countries with the aim of causing unrest in these countries, and this is also needed. Rings alone. All of this talk separates us. This history separates for us many things, which we see in reality, and many things that we saw in the past, and it gives us an idea of expecting what may happen in the future. We ask God Almighty to honor Islam and Muslims. May God reward you well, and may God's peace, mercy, and blessings be upon you.